It's such a privilege to be here with you this morning, and we appreciate so much those who have led us this morning in our worship and you for worshiping along with us. It's good to see everyone here this morning. Got a good crowd, a lot of visitors, and I want to say, personally, I know Adam did as well, we are grateful to have each and every one of you here this morning. I would like to remind you that I know there is a lot going on. But the next few months here are going to be extremely busy. And maybe this sermon this morning will be a little timely in that regard. But I want to remind you that next Sunday, of course, we do have the singing at Baldwin. Now, I heard this past week that the flu was pretty severe up there, so we'll be in contact with them. I know Brother David or someone will, but we'll let you guys know if we're still going. But next Sunday afternoon, flu or not, after morning services, we plan to have a meeting, short meeting right after morning services, for anyone who's interested in going with us to Honduras. And I know there are some of you who've already committed to this. I know there are some who committed and said they didn't know. Some at first said they didn't know and now said they're going to go. But what we need to do next Sunday is we need to go ahead and get a finalized list of our number. We need help. And so if you have not thought about doing this, we're going to need. We had some that were going that have now said they're not. And we need some of you to go. We need help. We're going down to the Por los Niños Children's Home, which we've supported here for longer than you've supported me, and many years. And we're going to be going down and we're going to be working there, painting some rooms, making some furniture, doing some building repairs. And so we're not going down. If you say, well, I can't teach, I can't preach, that's okay. They can't even speak English. And so it doesn't matter. You do not need your mouth for anything other than to eat while you're there. But we're going to go down. And we'll be going a week. We're going the first week in June. And so if you're planning on making this trip, I need to see you. We need to go ahead and get the list finalized next Sunday. We need to go ahead and start making preparations for passport applications, airline tickets, and all that in the next few weeks. And so please be here next week. Now if you say, well, I don't have any money. I'd love to go, but I can't afford to go. Please come anyway or come see me privately. And we'll talk about that. Good-looking group of young people here on the front row this morning. Always glad to see them and glad they're here. You know, young people today learn a lot of things by video or by visual learning, where a lot of us may have learned them in a different way. How many of you in here are 8 years old and under? If you're under 8 years old, raise your hand. All right, I like to see that. A lot of hands going up. What if I told you about a fellow this morning that by the time he was 8 years old, wrote 2 new languages that were only his own? Had the letters, had the pronunciation, but then he decided they weren't very useful, so he threw them away. And then later on, this fellow would become a professor, and he would learn other languages. He would invent other languages and become one of the most popular writers of all time. Would any of you who are over 8 years old feel like you're a little behind? This guy was a genius. And many of you know him, although you may not realize you know him. His name was Tolkien. And he was a professor over in England. He, at the time he was 8 years old, was already obviously brilliant. He invented languages, spoke to himself in these languages. Later on in life, he invented the Elvish and the Dwarvish language, and for geeks like me, that's actually pretty cool. How many of you know who these people are? Come on, Jonathan McCoy, I know you. There you go. Don't be bashful. All the nerds, raise your hand. If you're familiar with Tolkien's work, then you're familiar that his most famous work is undoubtedly The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And when I said our young people today are learning so many things visually instead of in other ways and learning them, a lot of our young people know these characters only through the movies that they've seen them in. In fact, I'll confess that I never read Tolkien until I got into college and they announced that the movies were being made on the motion picture screen. I didn't take a lot of time to read. This picture right here is actually taken from one of the most famous chapters in the book, The Hobbit. And what it is there's this hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. And he sets off with Gandalf the Wizard and a group of dwarves, and they're going to go and reclaim the gold from the mountain because you guys are already, anyway, they're on a journey. And the hobbit is traveling, and as they're traveling, they are captured by a group of goblins in the mountains. And the hobbit, Bilbo, he falls down. And when he falls down, he encounters this creature there, this ghoul-like creature named Gollum. And he's called Gollum because that's all he says for a long time in his life is Gollum, and over and over and over. Well, anyway, they have an interaction, and Gollum decides he's going to eat Bilbo. And Bilbo decides that's not a good idea. And so they begin to have this dialogue back and forth, and finally it's proposed, let's have a contest. And if you win, then you can go. If I win, I get to eat you. And they agree that's a pretty good deal. So they begin a contest of riddles. The chapter in the book is called Riddles in the Dark. And as we look at this chapter and as we look at all the different riddles that they trace back and forth, it's a brilliant chapter that Tolkien pens. And one of my favorite riddles in there, and the one really that ends up saving Bilbo's neck literally, is this one. Gollum proposes to him this riddle. This thing, all things, devours. Birds, beasts, trees, flowers. Gnaws iron, bites steel. Grinds hard stones to meal. Slays kings, ruins towns, and beats high mountain down. Now at first, Bilbo is absolutely stumped. He just doesn't know the answer. Gollum's grin on his face gets pretty big because he's about to have a meal that's not fish for the first time in about 500 years. And as he's looking here and he's challenging, he says, you don't know, you don't know. And finally Bilbo says, just give me some more time. Or is it the other way around? Anyway, I think I'm telling it backwards. You can read the book and find out for yourself. Excuse me, Gollum says, give me more time. Bilbo's about to escape, and Gollum figures out the answer is time. Time. Time is the thing that wears mountains down, slays kings. It wears down all life. And as we think about this morning, as we enter into a new year, as we enter into 2013, and as we think about, have you ever thought about it's the year 2013? Think about the year you graduated and ask yourself the day you graduated what you thought you'd be doing and where you thought you'd be in 2013, or did you think you'd even make it there? How long has it been since you graduated high school? It's passing by pretty quickly, isn't it? Time ticks, time moves, time keeps going. Time is an interesting thing. One writer has said about time, he said, time is free, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. And once you've lost it, you can never get it back. The most valuable commodity we have in our lives today is time. Time is something that absolutely cannot be bought on a shelf. It cannot be purchased in a store. And yet at the same time, if we could, what would we pay for it? There was a movie that came out a couple of years ago, and the setting was in the future when the world was overpopulated, and everyone in the future had, once they reached a certain age, they were given so many days or so many hours left to live. And in order to live longer, they had to work and earn more time. Well, the problem was that time cost exactly what it cost to work. And so if you didn't eat, you didn't pay your rent, you didn't do anything, then you could live. But then you'd die of starvation. And so the movie was based around this entire concept. If you could buy time, what would a person do to purchase more time? Stop and think about it. How many times have you wished there were 28 hours in a day? So that after you got up and went through your daily routine and the kids went to school and you went to work and you came home and you washed the clothes and you cooked the supper and you sat down and you did all that, how nice would it be if there were 4 more hours that you could have all to yourself? What more could you get done? Well, I suggest to you that the probability is that we would fill those 4 hours with more stuff and be wishing for more time, because you see, time is priceless and we spend it like it's going out of style. You know, the Bible talks a lot about time. And this morning, as we're moving into a new year, and as we're maybe, and I was going to do a sermon on resolutions this morning, but a friend of mine said they were very cheesy and just pointless, so I decided not to do that. But as you're thinking about this year, and as you're reflecting on the past year, if you do that sort of thing when a new year rolls around, or even if you're not and you're just here this morning, I want you to stop and reflect on your life and ask yourself, how do I manage my time? Am I spending it wisely? Am I spending it in the way I should? And what does the Bible say about time? You know, we're faced every day with a choice, the things we're going to do. Am I going to do something for myself? Am I going to do something for someone else? Am I going to do the things that need to be done? Some of us have a wonderful, wonderfully terrible habit of wasting a lot of time and putting things off to the last hour. We take after our Congress and we try to get deals done in the midnight hour when no one's watching. And some of us feel like we function better under that system. Well, this morning as we consider these things, what does the Bible say about time? And what does the Bible tell us about the time that we have? And so let's begin. Have you ever been doing something? Have you ever been so busy doing something that you look up and someone says, hey, we've got to go, or hey, we're about to be late? And have you ever had that happen to you? When I was preaching in Arcadia, Louisiana several years ago, I was out in my yard one day and I was splitting firewood. I'll never forget it, Monday morning. And Mondays back then, I always took Monday off and did whatever I needed to do. I was out splitting firewood and this man walked up in my yard. And he said, hello, sir. He said, I need $3. Never had anyone ask me in my life for $3. He asked me for $3. I said, if you don't mind me asking, what do you need $3 for? He said, I've got to put gas in my car. This was back when $3 would buy gas. And he said, I've got to put some gas in my car and I've got to go to work. I work in Monroe, which is about 40 miles away. And I said, well, that's not going to get you enough to get back. He said, well, I've got a paycheck when I get there. He said, I'll cash that and I'll have it. He said, I just need money to get to work. And I began to ask him, well, where do you work? And he told me where he worked. And then I said, well, what time do you go to work? See, it was 11 in the morning. And he said, well, we start work at 8. And I said, sir, it's 11 in the morning. And he said, is it? And he just took off running down the road. I don't know. I found out later on that the man was actually kin to me. He was some of my family that Mom and them said stay away from. His name was Kerwin. But he lived in the dugout at the Minden baseball field for a few years. Kerwin was special. But anyway, have you ever been like Kerwin? Have you ever thought you had time and you realized that the clock had gone past? Have you ever been working in the sunset on your day a little too quick? Have you ever, maybe if you're like some of us and you do work for someone else, you estimated it will take me 4 hours to accomplish this goal, and 8 hours in you realize I'm nowhere near and the sun's setting on this and I'm behind. Have you ever felt like that? Well, the first thing the Bible tells us is that we need to learn to know the time. We need to be aware of what time it is. We need to be aware of what's going on in the world around us. We need to be aware of our lifespan. We need to be aware of the days. We need to be aware of how much time we have or don't have. In Romans 13, verses 11 through 14, Paul says, and do this. That's a command. Knowing the time. You need to pay attention to what time it is. We don't need to live our lives like Kerwin and wake up one day and say, well, is it that late already? Am I 70 years old already? Are my children grown already? Have I already used this entire day? Has this week already slipped by? Has another year gone by and I didn't realize it? Has the sun set on my life and I never stopped and realized what time it was? Paul says, do this knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Therefore let us cast off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. James says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year here or there, rather buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. James says, understand that your life is not a motionless day. Your life is not an eternal day. The sun is rapidly setting on your life. And all the tasks and all the errands that we have set before us, we have a limited time frame to accomplish them. And the Bible says we need to open our eyes and know the time. Job said of his own life, he said, now my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away, they see no good. They pass by like swift ships, like an eagle swooping on its prey. Every older person I've ever talked to has said that time goes faster as you get older. As we get older, we don't count the days, or our time rather, by hours. We don't count them by days, but we begin counting them by birthdays, by holidays, by the birth of kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. And before we know it, 70, 80, 90, 100 years have been logged into our life's book. And we ask ourselves, where did it go? My oldest son will be 10 years old this coming year. I cannot believe that it was 10 years ago that we welcomed him into this world. And I asked myself, how in the world did he get to be 10? And have I, with those 10 years of my life, have I taken the opportunities that I needed to take to do the things for him that I should have done? Friends, we've got to open our eyes to our lives and the lifespan that we have and the time we have in a day. It's easy to just let the day pass by and not care what's going on, but we need to be a people who are aware of what time it is. Number two, the Bible talks about exactly what these two young people are doing. When's the last time you stopped and watched a child? If you haven't done that in a while, I invite you to do that sometime. Children are amazing. Sometimes I'll catch my boys, I'll ease up the steps at my house, and I'll get right to where I can see above the steps where they can't see me, and I'll just sit there for a few minutes and watch them as they play. You ever done that with your children? You ever watch children at a place look out of a window and be awestruck by a butterfly or by a bird or by something else? Have you ever watched children just stop and appreciate the beauty of life? And yet so many times children observe things that we don't. My youngest son, Josh, all the time, he'll tell me, he'll say, Dad, did you see such and such? And they were wearing such and such, and they said this, and they did that. And I'll say, I don't remember any of that. You know why? Because children take the time to observe what's going on around them. Children take the time to see the world and all of its grandeur, where so oftentimes we're too busy to appreciate what's all around us. And so the next thing the Bible tells us is to stop and take the time. Take the time to do several things. A wonderful Christian woman reminded me a few months ago that life cannot be a busy rush, but that God says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted above the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. We need to remember that God says, take time to stop and look at life and survey even my greatness at times. God says that we need to take time in our lives to appreciate things, to appreciate our families, to appreciate the beauty of the world. There are several things He tells us. Question, are you busy? One brother this morning said, I am busy. And I hear that all the time. We're so busy. We're so busy. We don't have time. Have you ever said that? Have you said that in the past 6 months? I don't have time, or I'm too busy. I want you to stop and consider a clock of the average American's life. Now, I realize some of you probably work a lot more than, like Brother Shelby, his work hours are going to be a lot more than these on here. And some of you are probably going to work a little less. Some of you are going to do a little more. But this is just an average of the American citizen. The average American citizen spends, by the way, the pink is during the week, the green is on the average weekend. And so that's why you'll see some differences in these. But the average American citizen spends about 0.19 hours per day caring for and helping household members. Fixing school lunches, helping homework, things like that. You spend about 0.2 of an hour doing that. On average. Now, by the way, remember there are a lot of people who don't have kids. Those of you who say, I spend all day working for my kids. There are people who don't have them, so it all averages out. The average American adult spends about half an hour, just over half an hour per day in educational activities. That is, studying for a test, working on schoolwork, learning new things at work, things like that. The average American spends about 4.5 hours working in work-related activities. Once again, we've got a lot of unemployed people, so it averages out. That's the average American. Big chunk working in work-related activities. The average American spends about 0.23 hours a day. And on the weekends, it jumps up to about half an hour a day, doing organizational, civic, and religious activities. Those of a religious nature during the week are about 0.07, and on the weekend about 0.32. And then those of volunteering for civic things, civic clubs, women's clubs, men's clubs, etc., form the rest of that and the majority of that. The average American during the week spends about 4.7 hours leisure, and sport time. That's broken down into social networking, watching television, which is about 2.6 hours on average per day for an American, participating in sports, exercise and recreation, telephone calls, emails, and other activities. Jumps all the way up to 6.5 hours a day on the weekend for the average American. As we move on around the clock, we see that the average American spends about 1.7 hours per day doing household activities, housework, food prep, cleanup, lawn and garden care, household management. Spends about 0.7 hours a day purchasing goods and services. That's shopping. Almost an hour a day shopping on average. Caring for other household members is about half an hour a day. And then as we move on up the clock, personal care, that includes sleeping, which is the majority of this, about 9.2 hours a day, and eating and drinking 1.18 hours a day. Now here's a question for you. If we were to plot out your average time clock, where would your numbers fall? Would you spend more time working in a day than you did recreating in a day? Where would your religious activities fall? How much time would you spend with your children? How much time would you spend with your spouse? How much time would you spend working on your marriage, strengthening your home? How much time would you spend reading the Word of God? You see, every American says, "Oh, I'm so busy." But friends, the survey says that the average American spends the majority of his day that's not in the bed sleeping doing what they want to do. Did you realize that? Watching TV 2.6 hours per day. But I'm so busy. But let me make sure I catch my show tonight. I've got it on DVR. I'm so busy, but I've got to go and play golf with my buddy. If you play golf, I'm not picking on you specifically. Fill in your sport. You see, the fact of the matter is that we need to learn to take the time to do the things that matter. And when it comes to our life's clock, we need to make sure that we get our priorities in line, and we need to make sure that our life's clock is filled up with the right kind of things. And all of us, and myself included, need to work on this. Number one, we need to take some time to see God's creation. The Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows His handiwork. He talks about how that day under day utters His speech. And there's no language, no place where their voice is not heard. Friends, we need to take some time out of our lives and quit running and turn off the television and get outside and see what God has done all around us. Because we appreciate all that He's done. What is God? Oh, my life is so terrible. My life is so awful. Walk outside and breathe into your lungs that mixture of nitrogen and oxygen and hydrogen and all the rest. Who knows what else is in Mississippi air. And breathe it into your lungs and just realize God put that there for you. Look up at the stars at night. Not long ago, the boys and I were out in the country somewhere, and it was a beautiful, clear night, and I said, "Let's stop." And they said, "For what?" I said, "Look up." And we sat there about 10 minutes, early in the morning before the sun rose, and every star in the sky was visible. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. I know there's a God. Paul says that His invisible attributes are clearly seen by the things that are made. Romans 1 and verse 20. That is, God has shown Himself to us in the creation. And if you're not doing it right now, you need to legislate yourself some time to stop and appreciate what God has made. By the way, that includes your children. That includes yourself. That includes appreciating all that God has made. Number two, we need to take time in our lives to see those in need. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10? The priest, the Levite, they passed by on the side of the road a few years ago. Brother Ed Rowland had a minor accident right up here where the McDonald's is now. I don't think it was even built at the time. And I was living over there in Willoughby Oaks, and I passed right by the accident. Well, if you've ever driven through there in the early morning going to school, you know the sun is right in your eyes. And all I could see was a wreck, and I'm doing this number. And as soon as I got through the red light, I got a phone call, and it was Ed Rowland. And he said, "Brother Adam." And I said, "What?" He said, "You just passed right by me." And I said, "That was you?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "Great." And I felt like that priest, especially since here I am the preacher, and he says, he called me out. And of course I checked on him, and everything was okay. It's a minor incident. Leslie's still here today, and she's smiling. That's good. But you know, that priest and that Levite, they didn't take the time to appreciate the needs of those around them. They walked right by that man on the side of the road. One version even says, Luke says here, that one of them even went by on the other side of the road. He didn't just walk right by him. He moved himself to the other side of the road, maybe to ease his own conscience. Maybe so that he could not see the severity of his damage or of his wounds, whatever it was. He closed his eyes to those in need. The Bible says of Jesus in Matthew 14, in verse 14, that when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, and he healed their sick. Folks, there's a sermon in Matthew 14:14. Jesus opened his eyes to see the needs of those around him, and he had compassion for them, and then he helped them. You and I need to take the time to, especially the people right here in this room, what's going on in their lives? You see a brother or sister who's here on Sunday and their head's hanging down a little bit and the smile is wiped off their face. It's easy to say, hey, how are you this morning, and move on. But you don't know how much it may mean to them to ask them, how are you this morning? How can I help you? What can I help you with? How about this one? What can I pray for you? Folks, see the needs of people around us. In our community, everywhere you go, from the gas station to the grocery store to the bank, there are people there who are in need, who are hurting, who are suffering. And you and I are the hands, the feet, the eyes, the heart of Jesus in this lost and dying world. We need to stop and take the time to look out for others instead of just worrying about what my agenda for the day is. Number 3, we need to stop and see what our own needs are. You know, the Bible tells us in 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 5 that we're to examine ourselves, whether we're in the faith. It's Paul who said in 1 Corinthians 9, 25 through 27, that he buffeted his body. He said, I discipline my body daily and bring it into subjection. Why? Lest I, after having saved others, myself am lost. Paul realized that it's easy to become so busy, even in working for the church, that we don't take care of ourselves. How many of us run through life and we never take the time to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, how am I with the Lord? What is my relationship like with God? What kind of a situation am I in with the Lord? Do I need to make that right? You know, those are questions we ought to ask ourselves every day. Jesus tells us, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet loses his own soul? We're in a culture where people are too busy for the gospel. They're too busy to read the Bible. They're too busy to pray. Well, I don't have time to visit the sick. I don't have time. Guess what? Even the preacher has made excuses like that. But we need to stop and ask ourselves, is it that we don't have the time? Or is it that we don't take the time? We need to stop like those children sometimes and look around at the world, look around at ourselves, and take some time to do the things that are needed. Finally, the Bible tells us we need to redeem the time. Now, the word redeem means to buy back or to use that which was useless. That is, God says we need to, with the time we have, use it. Listen to what Paul said to the church at Ephesus. He said, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Folks, we have a limited window to accomplish what we're here on this earth to accomplish. And we have a biblical worldview. Heard some scary statistics on the radio just yesterday about the percentage of Americans who hold a biblical worldview. I'm going to do some more research on that, and a lesson will probably be coming in coming months, but it's actually scary. How many people in America say, yes, I'm a Christian, but they don't identify with the principles found in the Bible? I wonder how many in the Lord's church say, I'm a member of the Church of Christ, but they themselves don't take the time to do the things that members of the church need to do. Friends, there are things required of you to be a Christian. Being a Christian is not showing up for worship and then going home and feeling so much better about my soul. Being a Christian is taking the time that God gives you 7 days a week and using it for the glory of God as you have opportunity. And so Paul says, redeem the time. He says to walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time. You and I are to spread the light of God's gospel to the lost and dying world, and we're to do that with the hours we have in the day. Am I saying that there's to be no slice of the pie for recreation or leisure? I hope not. I enjoy doing things and fun things as much as the next guy. Am I saying that we ought to knock a few hours off of work? No, I don't think so. Are we saying that we ought not to sleep as much? Well, if it's 9 hours a night, then yeah, probably not that much, you bum. Get up. What I'm saying is this. Use the time you have. All of us in our culture are guilty of taking the remote control and flipping through the channels a little too much. All of us in our culture have the possibility, in fact, a lot of you I know, we spend a little bit too much time on that computer and seeing what everyone else is doing. Do you know what we do when we stop and see what everyone else is doing? We're doing nothing ourselves. Folks, we need to start using our time and not losing it. And so the Bible tells us in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 10 that whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. Are there things you want to accomplish in your life? Are there goals that you've set in your life? Are there things you want to do for friends or neighbors or family? Are there people that you want to talk to about the gospel? Are there things you want to teach your children or instruct your children in? Guess what? Your time, it's passing by. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Paul said it this way to the church at Colossae. Whatever you find to do, do it heartily as to the Lord. Friends, live your life and put the clock to work for you. Redeem the time. And so as we close this morning, we close with a question. And the question is this. In the clock of your life, how are you using the time that you have? I laugh every time a high school or college kid tells me, I'm so busy. An unmarried person with no children, I'm so busy. And you folks are laughing with me if you say, I'm not trying to try to make fun or make light of them. I was busy when I was in college too, I thought. And then family comes along. And then you think you're busy. And then the real world comes along, and then you think you're busy. I've talked to a lot of retired people who said, I always thought I was busy until I got retired. We can always be busy. We can always waste the clock. We can always let hours slip by and not accomplish the things we want to do. And friends, we can let the clock strike 12 on our lives and not be right with God. And that's the greatest travesty of all. This morning, if you're here and you're not a child of God, if you're not a Christian, why are you putting it off? Remember the promise of James, we do not know what will happen on the morrow. Our life is like the fog in the morning when the sun rises, it's burnt away and it's not to be seen again. Life is moving on. We need to get moving. If you're here this morning and you are a child of God, and maybe you've not been managing your time correctly. Maybe you've not been giving enough time to your family, to your marriage, to your children. Maybe you've not been giving enough time to Bible study. Last week we began putting in our bulletin each week, I'm going to do it for the rest of this year, Lord willing, a Bible reading schedule which will let you read the Word of God through in 1 year. One of them goes straight through from Genesis to Revelation. One of them is a selected reading which takes from every sector of the Bible each week so that you get a good round reading, but they both accomplish the same task. You're only about 5 days behind. If you want those, get them from last week's bulletin and catch up. And make time every day to do the things you need to do. Make time every day to be the parent you need to be. Make time every day to be the spouse you need to be. Make time every day to be the child of God that you need to be. If we can help you this morning in any way, then we invite you to come as we stand together and sing. Faithful to Him will He find us watching, with our lamps all trimmed and bright. Oh, can we say we are ready, brother?
the soul's bride home. Say, will he find you and me still watching, waiting, waiting when the Lord shall come? Blessed are those whom the Lord finds watching, and his glory they shall share. If he shall come at the dawn or midnight, will he find us watching there? Oh, can we say we are ready, brother, ready for the soul's bride home? Say, will he find you and me still watching, waiting, waiting?